Trump's entire war on Iran is based on a lie. Now, the person saying this is not a Democrat in opposition to Donald Trump, not a protester, not a journalist, not some think tank analyst sitting in Washington telling you it's a bad idea. This is an insider from inside the administration of Donald Trump. And this big explosive letter tells us a lot about what is going on inside the White House right now. A top Trump insider quit last night. His resignation letter was posted on social media, addressed directly to Donald Trump. It was one of the most explosive documents to come out of Washington since Donald Trump took over. This is Joe Kent. And what did he say? What does it tell us about the war on Iran right now and the situation that Donald Trump is at this point among his insider team? That's what we're going to look at in this video. So remember, like, share, subscribe, sign up for our membership. Our membership has a daily news bulletin capsule that we're putting up every day. Do take a look at it and sign up and see if you like it or not, right? Let's get to it. In order to understand more about this resignation letter and why it matters, we need to understand who Joe Kent is. Now, this man was not a appointee. He was a man who earned his credentials the hard way. He spent his entire adult life fighting terror from day one from inside the United States. He served 20 years in the U.S. Army Special Forces, Green Beret, completing 11 combat deployments in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria. He retired from the Army in 2018, joined the CIA's Special Activities Center, which is a covert unit responsible for high-risk missions, including counter-terror, raids, intelligence gathering, and irregular warfare. His first wife, Shannon Kent, was a Navy senior chief petty officer who was killed by an ISIS suicide bomber in Syria. Her death drove him into public life after he retired. He was involved in political advocacy after Shannon's death, running for Congress twice in Washington state, losing both times by very narrow margins before Trump nominated him in early 2025 to lead the National Counterterrorism Center. Yesterday, this man resigned, and he did not go quietly. He posted his statement on social media directly addressed to Donald Trump. Now, we've looked through the statement. It's available on social media. You can take a look at it as well. But what I've done is pulled out 5 arguments. My colleague Ajit and I pulled out 5 things that have been said in this statement that is really, really interesting and tells us a lot about Donald Trump's war on Iran. Now, his opening claim, Kent actually says, which is the most explosive in my opinion, is that Iran posed no threat to the United States. Remember, this is the entire basis of Trump starting this war. Kent says the administration was deceived by misinformation run by, and I'm quoting here, high-ranking Israeli officials, influential members of the American media who he claims managed to create a sense of urgency to push the US into a war. So he's saying basically the US entered a war without fully understanding what was going on, and Israel actually pushed them into doing it. He draws a parallel to what led up to the war in Iraq and accused Israel of using the same playbook that drew America into the conflict then, that costed thousands of American lives. Now, Donald Trump, in response to this, has flatly denied it, and he's called Kent weak on security, saying that it's a good thing he resigned. But what is the reality? Now, according to analysts at the Atlantic Council, this wasn't a classic preemptive strike that triggered by an Iranian threat. The operation appears to have been built on a logic of exploiting a weakness in the regime in order to bring political change inside Iran. So it is not in response to an attack. The question of what the end game really is, or what is the final plan for Donald Trump, remains unanswered. Now, the second thing that Kent says in his, in his resignation is that this is a trap that will cost America lives, money, and prosperity. He reminds Donald Trump that this was a core part of his own foreign, policy message, that he would not engage America in this sort of war. If we look at the numbers, though, according to Trump's administration officials, the US has already spent $12 billion in the first 2 weeks of this war. So the Center for Strategic International Studies estimate the first 100 hours alone costed $891 million per day. Elizabeth Warren, who's a senator, has basically said there's no money to pay $15 million to pay for the 15 million Americans who've lost their health care, but we have billions of dollars to bomb Iran. So on the first point, he's saying that America's war entirely is a lie. Secondly, that they're bleeding money and they shouldn't be doing so. In the third point, Kent effectively says that, there's the promise of a quick win was a lie again. So far, the facts seem to support him. Now, despite the fact that there was a killing of the Supreme Leader Khomeini and there was sustained heavy bombing in Iran, Iran has not returned to the negotiating table. Instead, it has attacked US assets across the Gulf. It has threatened to strike civilian areas. It has warned to target any ship linked to the US that's passing through the Strait of Hormuz. Trump himself has given widely shifting timelines, saying that the war could end in days, then he said it's going to end in weeks, then he said it might be even longer, we'll have to sit tight. He framed it as a fight for Iranian freedom in the beginning, then he said he's open to deal with the current regime. At one point he said we won, and then at the other point he said it's still ongoing. So Trump, as we know, does not have the stomach right now for a prolonged fight, obviously, because this is what the people inside his regime are saying. But right now, he seems completely stuck. And so what Kent is saying in his resignation is that the idea that this would be quick is not true. It's not going to be quick. The fourth argument, he says, is deeply personal. Remember, this is someone who lost a loved one to a previous war. He says he cannot support sending the next generation of Americans to fight and die in a war that, in his view, serves no American interest. Remember, there was a lot of criticism in the beginning of this war that it's not about America, it's about Israel. And why is America fighting Israel's war? Early casualty numbers also, remember, 200 American soldiers have been injured. About 8 have been killed, or 13 have been killed so far, I beg your pardon. And these are numbers that the American population is not going to take lightly. CNN did a poll conducted after the strikes and found that 59% of the Americans disapprove of the decision to strike Iran. 60% say they don't trust Trump to make the right decisions about the use of force. And this is important. So maybe they trust him when it comes to trade and making deals, but they don't trust him when it comes to the military. 62% said he should be required to get congressional support before he goes any further in this military action. So obviously domestic support is waning as well. And the last argument, he closes his letter with a direct appeal to Trump, saying that he still has the power to change direction and the time to do so is now. So effectively what Kent is telling Trump is that there's only loss and devastation ahead of you. You need to stop right now and pull back. Has Trump responded? He has, of course, said that's not happening. On Truth Social, he said basically he mused about whether US should simply finish off what is left of the Iranian state. He also publicly criticized his NATO allies for refusing to join the operation and simultaneously claimed that the US doesn't need them anyway. Like I pointed out yesterday, there is another aspect to internal criticism for Donald Trump now coming from his senior administration officials, and that is J.D. Vance. Vance has been notably very quiet through this entire conflict. Before joining the administration, he had openly said US military involvement in Middle East is something he does not support. In 2024, he said a war with Iran would be a huge distraction of resources. And private messages from Signalgate reportedly showed him expressing doubts about US strikes on the Houthis as well. This week, reporters pushed him directly to ask him if he had any reservations, and his answer, he sort of deflected. He said he trusts Trump to get the job done, and he accused reporters of trying to drive a wedge between him and the president, but he didn't really answer the question that was being asked. So then, draw your own conclusions. Now, the reason why I find this resignation letter very interesting is because it gives us an insight into what's happening inside the White House. The fact that senior members of the White House are so unhappy that they feel that there is no other route but to resign, and also to do so publicly in this manner. So in conclusion, we get a clue from this resignation letter of what the senior officials in the White House are actually saying, the arguments that they're making, and the fact that they feel that it's come to a point where they can no longer support what Trump is doing, and they can't even leave quietly. Kent's resignation actually has given us many clues about what is actually going on inside Trump's White House. There are some analysts who say that this particular war started by Trump is going to cost him more than he was willing to bet when he started off. We're going to have to watch and see how much holding power Trump actually has if Iran uses their main card of squeezing oil until it begins to really, really hurt the people of the United States of America. In the meantime, the rest of the world is hurting as well, including those of us who live in India. So the general interest for everyone across the world will be to end this quickly, end this now. It all boils down to the ego of one man. Is Donald Trump willing to accept that this could have been a mistake? Or is he willing to accept that any sort of imaginary goal he had when he started off has been either achieved or abandoned to a point where he can call this off? The whole world waits to see.